The dust kicked up around Jake's boots as he dismounted his horse outside the small trading post in Tombstone, Arizona. The year was 1887, and the frontier town buzzed with miners, gamblers, and drifters all seeking their fortune. Jake wasn't like most cowboys who passed through this desert town. He had sharp green eyes that missed nothing and a reputation for being fair but deadly when crossed. Inside the trading post, Jake heard raised voices. Through the wooden slats, he could see three Apache women huddled in the corner while a large man in expensive clothes argued with the store owner, Bill Henderson. The man's name was Caldwell, a wealthy rancher who owned most of the land around these parts. "I told you, Henderson, I need workers for my ranch. These Apache will do just fine," Caldwell said, pointing at the women. "They owe money for supplies, don't they?" Jake pushed through the door, his spurs jingling. The conversation stopped as everyone turned to look at him. He tipped his hat to the women and nodded to Henderson, who looked relieved to see him. "Afternoon, Bill. Seems like there's some kind of discussion going on here," Jake said calmly, but his hand rested near his gun belt. Caldwell laughed harshly. "Nothing that concerns you, cowboy. These Apache women ran up a debt buying food and medicine. Since they can't pay in cash, they'll work it off on my ranch." Jake looked at the three women. The oldest appeared to be in her 50s, with gray streaks in her long black hair. The second woman looked to be in her 30s, and she held a young girl close to her side. The girl couldn't have been more than 12 years old. All three wore simple cotton dresses and looked tired and worried. "What exactly do they owe?" Jake asked Henderson. "About $47 for medicine and food over the past month," Henderson replied uncomfortably. "Their men were killed in a skirmish with soldiers up north. They've been trying to get by on their own." $47 was a considerable sum, but Jake had saved his pay from cattle drives for months. He reached into his vest pocket and pulled out a leather pouch. The coins inside clinked as he counted out the money. "I'll pay their debt," Jake announced. Caldwell's face turned red. "You can't do that. I already made an arrangement with Henderson." "No arrangement was made," Henderson said quickly. "I just told you what they owed." Jake placed the coins on the counter. "There's $50. That covers their debt plus interest." The oldest Apache woman stepped forward. Her English was broken but clear. "We thank you, cowboy, but we cannot accept charity." "It's not charity, ma'am. I have a proposition for you," Jake replied. "My name is Jake. I've got a small ranch about 20 miles south of here. It's not much, but it's good land with water rights. I need help taking care of it." Caldwell slammed his hand on the counter. "Those Apache belong to me now. They owe a debt." "The debt is paid," Jake said, his voice getting colder. "And nobody belongs to anybody else around here." "We'll see about that," Caldwell threatened. "I have influence in this town. I can make life very difficult for you." Jake turned to face Caldwell directly. "You're welcome to try, but I wouldn't recommend it." The tension in the room was thick as smoke. Henderson nervously wiped his hands on his apron while the Apache women watched the exchange with growing concern. "What is your proposition?" the oldest woman asked Jake. "I'm taking them," Jake declared firmly, looking Caldwell straight in the eye. "These ladies will come work for me and I'll pay them fair wages. They'll have their own cabin and can leave whenever they choose." Caldwell's hand moved toward his gun, but Jake was faster. His Colt was out of its holster before Caldwell could draw, though Jake kept it pointed at the floor. "I wouldn't," Jake said quietly. Caldwell raised his hands slowly. "This isn't over. Those Apache have something that belongs to me, and I aim to get it back." "What are you talking about?" Jake asked. Caldwell smirked but didn't answer. Instead, he turned and walked out of the trading post, his expensive boots clicking on the wooden floor. After Caldwell left, Jake holstered his gun and turned back to the women. "I'm sorry about that, ladies. Some folks around here don't have proper manners." The youngest woman, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. "He speaks truth about something we have. Our father left us sacred symbols before soldiers killed him. Caldwell believes they show location of silver mine." Jake raised his eyebrows. "Silver mine?" The oldest woman nodded sadly. "Our father was medicine man and keeper of old stories. He gave us symbols before he died, but we do not understand their meaning. Caldwell heard about them from someone in town." "These symbols," Jake said thoughtfully, "would you be willing to show them to me?" The women exchanged glances. Finally, the oldest woman reached into a small leather pouch hanging around her neck. She pulled out 3 pieces of carved bone, each about the size of a silver dollar. Strange markings covered both sides of each piece. Jake examined them carefully, but couldn't make sense of the symbols. They looked like a combination of Apache writing and Spanish markings, with what appeared to be directional arrows and animal shapes. "My father said they would protect our people when the time was right," the middle woman explained. "But we have lost everything. Our men are dead, our home is gone, and now this white man wants to take the symbols by force." Jake handed the bones back to her. "Well, he's not going to get them, that's a promise." Henderson had been listening to everything. "Jake, you should know that Caldwell has been asking questions around town about Apache artifacts. Word is he's already found some old Spanish maps that might connect to those symbols." This news made Jake's jaw tighten. Spanish explorers had been through this area hundreds of years ago, and stories of hidden silver mines were common. If Caldwell really believed these symbols could lead to treasure, he wouldn't give up easily. "What are your names?" Jake asked the women. "I am Maria," said the oldest. "This is my daughter," she indicated the middle woman, "and my granddaughter." "Well, Maria, and my offer stands. You can come work for me and those symbols stay with you. Whatever secrets they hold, they're yours by right." Looked at her mother and daughter. "We accept your offer, mister. We have nowhere else to go, and you have shown us kindness." As they prepared to leave the trading post, Henderson pulled Jake aside. "Be careful, Jake. Caldwell has friends in high places. The territorial governor owes him favors, and he's got connections with the army. If he really wants those symbols, he'll find a way to get them." Jake nodded grimly. "Thanks for the warning, Bill, but those women have been through enough. They deserve a chance at a peaceful life." Outside, Jake helped the women load their few belongings onto his horse, and a mule Henderson lent them. As they prepared to ride south toward Jake's ranch, he noticed several of Caldwell's men watching from across the street. "Looks like we might have company on the trail," Jake told Maria quietly. She followed his gaze and saw the men. "We bring you trouble, mister. Perhaps it is better if we go different way." "No, ma'am," Jake replied, checking his rifle. "I said I'm taking you to my ranch, and that's exactly what I'm going to do. Nobody's going to stop us." As they rode out of Tombstone, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of something much bigger. Those Apache symbols had caught Caldwell's attention for a reason, and men like Caldwell didn't give up when they smelled money. The desert stretched out before them, vast and unforgiving. Behind them, Jake could see dust clouds that suggested they were being followed. He had no idea that those 3 pieces of carved bone would soon change all their lives forever. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly as they made their way through the rocky terrain. The young girl rode quietly behind her mother, occasionally glancing back at the distant riders following them, kept her hand on the leather pouch containing the symbols, as if protecting something far more valuable than silver or gold. Jake had defended people before, but something about these 3 Apache women and their mysterious symbols felt different. As they rode deeper into the desert, he began to suspect that Caldwell's interest in the symbols went beyond simple greed. There was something else at play here, something that would test everything Jake believed about justice and loyalty in this harsh frontier land. Jake's ranch sat in a valley surrounded by red rock formations and scattered mesquite trees. A small creek ran through the property, providing precious water in the desert landscape. The ranch house was simple but sturdy, built from adobe and wood, with a covered porch that offered shade during the hot afternoons. As they approached the ranch, Jake pointed to a smaller building about 50 yards from the main house. "That cabin there is yours if you want it. It's got 2 rooms and a good roof. I built it for ranch hands, but it's been empty for months." Maria examined the cabin with approval. "It will do nicely, mister. We are grateful for your generosity." Jake helped them unload their belongings, which fit into 2 small bundles. As they settled in, he noticed kept checking the area around the cabin, as if looking for potential escape routes. "You don't need to worry," Jake assured her. "My property line extends for miles in every direction. If anyone comes looking for trouble, we'll see them long before they get close." That evening, Jake invited the women to join him for dinner. His cooking wasn't fancy, but there was plenty of beef stew and fresh bread. As they ate, spoke up for the first time since leaving town. "Mister, why did you help us? Most white men would have let Mr. Caldwell take us." Jake set down his spoon and looked at the young girl. Because it was the right thing to do. Nobody should be forced to work against their will, and nobody should have their family belongings stolen. Translated for her mother in Apache, and Maria nodded approvingly. My mother says you have a good heart, explained. She wants to know about your family. Don't have much family left, Jake replied honestly. My parents died when I was about age. Been on my own ever since, working cattle drives and saving money to buy this place. The conversation was interrupted by the sound of horses approaching. Jake quickly stood and moved to the window, his hand automatically going to his gun. In the moonlight, he could see 6 riders approaching the ranch house. Get away from the windows, Jake ordered quietly. Take and your mother to the back room. The women quickly moved while Jake stepped onto the porch with his rifle. The riders stopped about 20 feet away, close enough to talk, but far enough to avoid being easy targets. Evening, called a familiar voice. It was Caldwell, accompanied by 5 of his ranch hands. Mind if we come in and talk? I mind, Jake replied firmly. It's late and you're not welcome here. State your business and move on. Caldwell laughed, but it wasn't a friendly sound. Always direct, aren't you? I want to make you an offer for those Apache women, $500 for all 3 of them. They're not for sale because they don't belong to me or anyone else, Jake said. They're free women working for wages. What about their little trinkets? Caldwell pressed. Those bone carvings they carry, I'll pay $1,000 just for those. Jake's grip tightened on his rifle. Not interested in any deals, Caldwell. Time for you to leave. One of Caldwell's men, a tall gunfighter named Vance, shifted in his saddle. Boss, we could just take what we want. 6 against 1 aren't bad odds. Except it's not 6 against 1, Jake replied calmly. He gave a low whistle, and suddenly 2 more rifle barrels appeared from the windows of the cabin, and Maria had positioned themselves to provide covering fire. Caldwell's expression darkened. You're making a serious mistake. Those symbols belong with people who understand their value. They belong with the people whose family left them, Jake shot back. Now get off my property before this gets ugly. The standoff lasted several tense minutes before Caldwell finally signaled his men to retreat. This isn't over, he called as they rode away. I'll be back with legal papers and territorial marshals. Those Apache are hiding stolen property. After the riders disappeared into the darkness, Jake went to check on the women. Still held her rifle, and Maria was comforting, who had been frightened by the confrontation. I'm sorry you had to be part of that, Jake said, but you handled yourselves well. We are used to defending ourselves, replied quietly. But this man, Caldwell, will not give up easily. Perhaps it would be better if we left and took the symbols with us. Where would you go? Jake asked. Caldwell has money and influence. He'll track you down no matter where you run. Maria spoke in Apache to her daughter, then translated. My mother says the symbols have brought nothing but trouble to our family. Maybe it is time to destroy them and end this curse. Jake sat down across from them. Before you do anything permanent, maybe we should try to understand what those symbols really mean. If they're important enough for Caldwell to risk a gunfight over, there might be more to them than just directions to a silver mine. The next morning, Jake rode into town to gather information. He stopped first at the territorial office, where a clerk named Peter Williams kept records of land claims and mining rights. Pete, I need to know about any silver mining claims in this area, particularly anything connected to Spanish explorers, Jake said. Williams, a nervous man with wire spectacles, looked around before answering. You're not the first person asking about that lately, Jake. Caldwell was here last week with some old maps. Said he was researching historical mining claims for a book he's writing. What kind of maps? Spanish colonial maps, maybe 200 years old. They showed mine locations and Indian settlements in this area. Caldwell seemed mighty interested in anything connected to Apache artifacts. This confirmed Jake's suspicions. He thanked Williams and headed to the saloon, where information flowed as freely as whiskey. The bartender, an old-timer named Charlie, had heard every rumor and story that passed through Tombstone. Charlie, what do you know about Spanish silver mines around here? Jake asked. Charlie polished a glass thoughtfully. Well, there's always been stories about lost Spanish treasure. Legend says when the Spanish abandoned this area in the 1700s, they hid several silver caches and left maps with friendly Apache tribes for safekeeping. Maps with Apache tribes. That's the story. Spanish explorers made friends with some Apache leaders, taught them to read simple maps in exchange for protection. When the Spanish left, they supposedly gave certain tribes symbols that would lead back to hidden silver. Jake's pulse quickened. What happened to these symbols? Most folks figured it was just a legend until recently, but Caldwell's been buying up old Spanish documents and maps from collectors back east. Word is he's close to finding the main cache. How much silver are we talking about? Charlie leaned closer. Some say enough to buy half of Arizona territory. Course, that's probably exaggerated, but even a fraction of the legend would make a man wealthy beyond imagination. Jake left the saloon with a heavy heart. If the symbols carried were really maps to Spanish silver, Caldwell would never stop pursuing them. The man's greed would put the Apache women in constant danger. When Jake returned to the ranch, he found teaching how to tend his small vegetable garden while Maria prepared an afternoon meal. The domestic scene made him more determined than ever to protect them. That evening, Jake sat with the women around the kitchen table. I learned some things in town today about those symbols. There's a chance they're connected to hidden Spanish silver mines from centuries ago. His face grew troubled. We suspected this might be true. Our grandfather told stories of Spanish friends who left gifts with our people, but we thought they were just tales for children. The problem is that Caldwell knows about the connection too, Jake continued. He's been collecting Spanish maps and documents. If those symbols really do lead to treasure, he'll bring the full weight of his influence to bear. Maria spoke to her daughter in Apache and nodded gravely before translating. My mother says our family has protected these symbols for generations. She believes they hold more than directions to silver. They contain spiritual power meant to help our people in times of great need. What kind of spiritual power? Jake asked respectfully. Carefully retrieved the 3 bone pieces from her pouch and placed them on the table. In the lamplight, the carved symbols seemed to shimmer and dance. Our grandfather said these symbols, when properly understood, would guide our people to safety and prosperity. But not prosperity through gold or silver. Prosperity through wisdom and strength. Jake studied the symbols more closely. They were definitely more complex than simple directions. Some markings looked like Apache writing, others resembled Spanish script, and still others appeared to be pictographs representing animals and natural features. What if, Jake said slowly, the Spanish didn't just hide silver? What if they left information about something else entirely? Water rights, safe territories, trade routes. His eyes widened. That would make more sense. Our people have always valued land and water over metal treasures. Suddenly, Maria stood up and pointed toward the window. In the distance, they could see the flickering light of torches approaching the ranch. Caldwell was returning, and this time he had brought more men. Jake counted at least 12 torches moving toward his ranch in the darkness. Caldwell had returned with a small army, and this time he meant business. The flickering lights spread out as they approached, suggesting the men were surrounding the property rather than approaching directly. They're trying to circle us, Jake observed grimly. Take and your mother into the root cellar behind the house. There's enough food and water down there for several days. We will not hide while you fight our battle, declared firmly. These symbols are our responsibility. This stopped being just about the symbols when Caldwell threatened my guests, Jake replied, checking his ammunition. But I need to know you're safe so I can focus on defending the ranch. Maria spoke quietly to her daughter in Apache and reluctantly agreed. My mother says we will go to the cellar, but only if you promise to call for us if you need help. We are not helpless women. Jake smiled despite the tension. I never thought you were, ma'am. As the women headed for the cellar, Jake positioned himself in the main house where he could see approaches from multiple directions. He had plenty of ammunition and good cover, but 12 men were formidable odds even for an experienced gunfighter. The torches stopped about 100 yards from the house, forming a rough circle around the ranch buildings. Jake could hear voices calling back and forth as Caldwell organized his men. Caldwell's voice boomed across the night air. I've got a territorial marshal with me and legal papers. You're harboring stolen Apache artifacts that belong to the territorial government. Jake knew this was likely a bluff, but he couldn't be certain. Caldwell had enough influence to have obtained some kind of official documentation, even if it wasn't entirely legitimate. Show me the papers in daylight with the marshal identified, Jake called back. Until then, you're trespassing on private property. I'm done playing games. Send out those women and the artifacts, or we'll come in and get them. Jake's response was to fire a warning shot into the air. The sharp crack of his rifle echoed across the valley, and the torches immediately began moving as Caldwell's men sought better cover. For the next hour, the standoff continued with occasional shots fired from both sides. Jake managed to wound one of Caldwell's men who got too close to the house, but the attackers were being cautious, apparently hoping to wear him down rather than risk a direct assault. Around midnight, Jake heard a different sound. Horses were approaching from the north, but without torches. He peered through the darkness and saw riders moving carefully toward the ranch. For a moment, he feared Caldwell had brought even more men, but then he heard a familiar voice. "Jake, this is Sheriff Tom Bradley from Tucson. I'm coming in under a flag of truce." Jake recognized Bradley's name. The sheriff had a reputation as an honest lawman who didn't bow to political pressure. If he was here, something significant had happened. "Come ahead, Sheriff, but keep your hands visible." Bradley rode up to the porch with 2 deputies, all carrying white cloths tied to their rifle barrels. The sheriff was a weathered man in his 50s with gray hair and steady eyes. "Jake, I need to talk to you about this situation," Bradley said, dismounting carefully. "Caldwell filed a complaint in Tucson claiming you're harboring stolen territorial property." "Those Apache women aren't stolen property, Sheriff. They're free citizens working for wages." "I'm not talking about the women," Bradley replied. "I'm talking about certain artifacts that might be connected to Spanish colonial claims. Caldwell says he has documentation proving those bone carvings belong to the territorial government." Jake studied the sheriff's face in the moonlight. "Do you believe that, Tom?" Bradley shook his head slightly. "Between you and me, no, but Caldwell has friends in high places and they're putting pressure on me to resolve this quickly. He's threatened to bring in federal marshals if I don't act." "What are you suggesting?" "Let me examine these artifacts with an independent expert. If they're really just family heirlooms, I'll back you completely. But if they're connected to significant territorial claims, we need to handle this properly." Jake considered the offer. Bradley seemed genuine, and having an honest sheriff involved might provide protection against Caldwell's influence. "I'll need to discuss it with the women," Jake said. "Those artifacts belong to them, not me." "Fair enough, but Jake, you should know that Caldwell's brought some serious firepower tonight. Several of his men are professional gunfighters from up north. This could get very bloody if we don't find a peaceful solution." Jake went to the root cellar to explain the situation to the Apache women, listened carefully, and translated for her mother before responding. "My mother says she trusts your judgment about this, Sheriff," said, "but she wants to be present when the symbols are examined. She knows stories about them that might be important." They emerged from the cellar and walked carefully toward Sheriff Bradley, who waited on the porch with his deputies. Maria carried the leather pouch containing the bone carvings. "Sheriff Bradley, this is Maria," and Jake introduced them. "Maria is the keeper of these family artifacts." Bradley tipped his hat respectfully. "Ma'am, I want you to know that I'm here to make sure you're treated fairly. Whatever these symbols are, you have rights that will be protected." Maria studied the sheriff's face for a long moment, then spoke to an Apache. "My mother says you have honest eyes," translated. "She will show you the symbols, but only if the white man Caldwell stays away. She says he has a hungry spirit that devours everything it touches." Bradley nodded and called out toward Caldwell's position. "Come up here alone and unarmed. We're going to settle this properly." Caldwell emerged from behind a large rock formation and approached the house. His expensive clothes were dirty from hiding in the desert, and his face showed frustration and anger. "About time, Bradley," Caldwell said. "I want those artifacts confiscated immediately. They're connected to territorial mining claims worth millions of dollars." "Slow down," Bradley replied calmly. "First, let's see what we're dealing with." Maria carefully removed the 3 bone pieces from her pouch and placed them on a wooden crate on the porch. Even in the dim light from Jake's lantern, the intricate carvings were clearly visible. Caldwell's eyes lit up with greed. "Those are definitely Spanish colonial markings. See those symbols there. They match maps I've purchased from collectors in and Mexico City." Bradley examined the bones carefully without touching them. They're certainly old and well-crafted, but being Spanish doesn't automatically make them territorial property. I have documentation proving that all Spanish mining claims in this territory became government property after the Mexican War, Caldwell insisted, pulling papers from his jacket. Any artifacts connected to those claims must be turned over to territorial authorities. Stepped forward. These symbols belong to my great-grandfather and his father before him. They have been in our family for many generations, long before any territorial government existed. Apache testimony isn't reliable in territorial court, Caldwell said dismissively. Watch your mouth, Jake warned, his hand moving toward his gun. Sheriff Bradley held up his hand for calm. Let me examine these documents you mentioned. Caldwell handed over several official-looking papers. Bradley read them carefully by lantern light, occasionally asking questions about specific clauses and signatures. After several minutes, the sheriff looked up. These documents are legitimate, but they don't say what you claim they say. They refer to active Spanish mining operations, not ceremonial or cultural artifacts. Those bone carvings are maps to silver mines, Caldwell protested. That makes them mining-related. Do you have proof they're actually maps? Bradley asked. Caldwell hesitated. Well, no, not direct proof, but the symbols match Spanish colonial mapping techniques. You're asking me to confiscate family heirlooms based on speculation, Bradley said firmly. That's not how the law works. Caldwell's face grew red with anger. Sheriff, I'm warning you that powerful people are watching this situation. Your cooperation will be remembered, and so will any lack of cooperation. Bradley's expression hardened. Are you threatening an elected sheriff? Because that would be a serious crime. The tension on the porch was explosive. Jake could see Caldwell's men shifting positions in the darkness, waiting for signals from their boss. Maybe we should let Maria tell us what her family stories say about these symbols, Jake suggested. If they're really just family artifacts, that should end this discussion. Translated the suggestion to her mother, who nodded and began speaking in Apache. Listened carefully before translating. My mother says the symbols were given to her great-great-grandfather by Spanish friends during a time of great danger. But they were not maps to silver or gold. They were something much more valuable to our people. What could be more valuable than silver? Caldwell demanded. Continued translating as Maria spoke. They are maps to sacred water sources that never run dry, even in the worst drought years. The Spanish explorers learned about these springs from our ancestors and created symbols to help both peoples remember their locations. Bradley leaned forward with interest. Water rights are certainly valuable in this territory, but they wouldn't fall under mining claims. Caldwell laughed harshly. You expect me to believe these symbols are just maps to water holes? I've invested thousands of dollars researching Spanish silver mines in this area. That's your choice, Bradley replied. But unless you can prove these artifacts are connected to actual mining operations, they remain the property of this Apache family. Maria spoke again, and translation surprised everyone. My mother says if Sheriff Bradley promises to protect our people's water rights, she will show him how to read the symbols. The Spanish intended them to benefit both peoples during times of hardship. Sheriff Bradley looked thoughtfully at the bone carvings. Ma'am, if these symbols really do show water sources, that information could help a lot of people during drought seasons. I'd be honored to learn about them. This was not the outcome Caldwell had expected, and his anger exploded. This is ridiculous. Bradley, you're being played by clever Apache lies? Those symbols are the key to millions of dollars in Spanish silver. The only person I see being played is you, Jake said quietly. Sounds like you've been chasing fool's gold while the real treasure was wisdom about surviving in the desert. Caldwell's hand moved toward his gun, but he found himself facing 3 armed men as both of Bradley's deputies drew their weapons alongside Jake. I wouldn't, Bradley said calmly. You and your men need to leave this property immediately. These women are under my official protection while I investigate this matter properly. For a moment, it seemed like Caldwell might try to fight anyway. His men were still hidden in the darkness, waiting for orders. But facing a sheriff and 2 deputies changed the legal situation dramatically. This isn't over, Bradley, Caldwell snarled. I'll appeal this to the territorial governor. I'll bring in federal authorities. Those symbols will be mine. You're welcome to try, Bradley replied. But right now, you're trespassing on private property and threatening peaceful citizens. Leave immediately, or I'll arrest you for disturbing the peace. Caldwell signaled to his men, and slowly the torches began moving away from the ranch. But Jake could see that several of the lights lingered in the distance, suggesting that not all of Caldwell's men had withdrawn. As the immediate threat receded, Maria carefully gathered the bone symbols and returned them to her pouch. She spoke to, who translated her words. My mother says the symbols have already begun to work their power. They have brought us a protector, she indicated Jake, and an honest lawman, she nodded to Bradley. She believes this is how the symbols help our people in times of need. 3 days after Sheriff Bradley's intervention, Jake woke to find Maria sitting on his porch at sunrise. She held the 3 bone symbols in her weathered hands, studying them in the early morning light. Good morning, Maria, Jake said in the few Apache words had taught him. Maria smiled and replied in English, Good morning, Jake. Today is day for truth. Jake sat beside her on the wooden steps. What kind of truth? Told you symbols show water places, but there is more. Much more, Maria explained carefully. Spanish friends left bigger gift than water maps. Before Jake could respond and emerged from the cabin, looked concerned as she approached her mother. Mother, what are you doing with the symbols? Asked in Apache. Maria replied in their native language, and Jake watched expression change from concern to amazement. What did she say? Jake asked. Sat down across from them, her voice filled with wonder. My mother says the time has come to reveal the complete truth about the symbols. She has been waiting for the right people to trust with the full secret. Maria carefully arranged the 3 bone pieces on the porch step, positioning them in a specific pattern. When placed together correctly, the symbols on adjacent pieces lined up to form larger, more complex markings. See how they fit, Maria said, pointing to the connections. Spanish friends very clever. 3 pieces keep secrets safe. Only together they show truth. Jake leaned closer to examine the combined symbol. What had appeared to be simple directional markings on individual pieces now formed an intricate map showing natural landmarks, water sources, and something else entirely. Those markings there, Jake said, pointing to a series of symbols that looked like buildings. Those aren't natural features. Translated as Maria explained, Spanish explorers found something here that Apache people had known for generations. Sacred cave system with underground river, but Spanish discovered something our people had not seen. What did they discover? Maria spoke at length in Apache while listened intently. Finally, translated, the Spanish found that the underground river flows through chambers filled with pure silver formations. Not silver that must be dug from rock, but silver that has been naturally purified by flowing water over thousands of years. Jake's eyes widened. Natural silver formations. The Spanish realized this was more valuable than any mine they had ever seen. The silver was already refined, ready to be collected, but they also understood it was a sacred place to our people. Maria continued speaking and translated. The Spanish made an agreement with our ancestors. They would take only small amounts of silver, enough to help both peoples trade with other tribes and settlers. In return, they would protect the location from other Europeans who might destroy the sacred site. This explained why Caldwell's research had led him toward the symbols. He had been partly right about Spanish silver, but completely wrong about its nature and purpose. Where is this underground river? Jake asked. Maria pointed toward the red rock formations that surrounded Jake's ranch. Close, very close. Your land sits above part of the cave system. That is why Spanish friends chose this valley for gift. They knew water would always flow here. Who had been listening quietly, suddenly pointed toward the horizon. Someone comes. Jake looked up to see a single rider approaching from the direction of town. As the figure got closer, he recognized Sheriff Bradley. Bradley dismounted and tipped his hat to the women. Morning, folks. I've got news from town. Caldwell left for yesterday with most of his men, says he's going to appeal to territorial authorities. What about his remaining men? Jake asked, having noticed signs that someone was still watching his property. That's why I'm here. 3 of his gunfighters stayed behind, and word in town is they're planning something tonight. Caldwell left orders for them to get those symbols by any means necessary. Translated for her mother, who nodded grimly. Maria spoke in Apache, then explained, "My mother says it is time to show you both the complete truth. She believes you can be trusted to protect the sacred place from men like Caldwell." Over the next hour, Maria revealed the full story of the Apache symbols. The underground river system extended for miles beneath the desert, providing reliable water for both human and animal communities. The silver formations, while valuable, were secondary to the life-giving properties of the pure water. Spanish friends understood that water is true wealth in desert, Maria explained. Silver can buy many things, but cannot buy life when wells run dry. Sheriff Bradley listened with growing amazement. "Ma'am, if this underground river system is as extensive as you describe, it could support settlements throughout this region. That's worth far more than any amount of silver." Maria nodded. Spanish friends knew this. They made symbols to help future generations find water during hard times. They hoped Apache people and newcomers could share gift of hidden river. "But men like Caldwell only see silver," Jake observed. "They destroy the natural formations trying to extract every ounce." "That is why symbols stayed hidden with our people," said. "We have been guardians, waiting for right time and right people to share the gift." Sheriff Bradley stood and looked toward the red rocks. "Would you be willing to show me this underground river? If it's what you describe, I might be able to get territorial protection for the site." Maria considered this carefully before nodding. "You have shown honor and fairness. I will show you entrance to Sacred Cave." They spent the afternoon preparing for the journey to the cave entrance. Maria insisted they wait until evening, explaining that the cave opening was hidden and easier to find in twilight when the setting sun created specific shadow patterns. As the sun began to set, Maria led them to a narrow canyon about a mile from Jake's ranch house. The canyon walls rose 40 feet on both sides, covered with ancient pictographs that told stories of Apache history and Spanish contact. "Our ancestors painted these pictures to mark the sacred place," explained as they walked deeper into the canyon. "Each painting tells part of the story about the gift from Spanish friends." At the end of the canyon, Maria stopped beside what appeared to be a solid rock wall. She examined the shadows carefully, then pressed against specific points on the stone surface. To Jake and Bradley's amazement, a section of rock swung inward, revealing a hidden entrance. "Spanish friends learned this from our ancestors," Maria said. "Secret door that opens only when you know right places to touch." Inside the cave, the sound of flowing water echoed from somewhere ahead. Maria lit a torch she had brought, and the flickering light revealed a natural tunnel extending into the rock formation. They followed the tunnel for about 50 yards before it opened into a vast underground chamber. Jake caught his breath at the sight that greeted them. An underground river flowed through the center of the chamber, its water crystal clear and reflecting the torchlight like liquid diamonds. Along the walls and ceiling, veins of pure silver had been exposed by centuries of flowing water, creating formations that looked like frozen waterfalls of precious metal. "It's beautiful," Sheriff Bradley whispered. Maria led them to the edge of the underground river. Water flows from mountains to the north, travels many miles underground, then emerges in springs throughout this valley. Spanish friends realized that whoever controls this water controls life in all surrounding lands. Jake knelt beside the river and cupped some water in his hands. It was the coldest water he had ever tasted. "This explains why your people considered this place sacred. Water is life. Silver is just decoration that water has made over many seasons," Maria said simply. They spent another hour exploring the chamber, with Maria pointing out various features and explaining their significance. The cave system was enormous, with passages leading in multiple directions. Some led to other chambers, while others connected to the surface springs that fed Jake's Creek and other water sources throughout the region. As they prepared to leave the cave, Sheriff Bradley turned to Maria. "Ma'am, I want to help protect this place, but I'll need your cooperation to make it legal. Would you be willing to file a formal claim for the water rights?" "How does this help?" asked. "Under territorial law, whoever files first claim on water sources gets legal control over them. If your family files the claim, you can decide how the water is used and who gets access to it." Maria spoke with and in Apache before responding. We agree, but with conditions. Water must be shared with all people who need it. Apache, Mexican, white settlers, everyone. No person or group can own water that gives life. I think we can write those conditions into the legal documents, Bradley said. And the territorial government might even provide protection for the site if it's registered as a crucial water source. As they emerged from the cave and the hidden door closed behind them, Jake noticed something that made his blood run cold. Fresh boot prints in the sandy canyon floor led directly to the cave entrance. "Someone's been watching us," Jake said quietly, pointing to the tracks. Sheriff Bradley examined the prints. 3 sets of boots, probably those gunfighters Caldwell left behind. They must have followed us here. Maria looked troubled. If bad men know about Sacred Cave, they will try to claim it for themselves. "Not if we get to the territorial office first," Bradley said. "I can file the water rights claim tomorrow morning and have it registered before Caldwell returns from." They made their way back toward Jake's ranch as darkness fell, but Jake kept feeling like they were being watched. His instincts proved correct when rifle shots suddenly rang out from the rocks above the canyon. "Take cover," Jake shouted, pushing the women behind a large boulder. Sheriff Bradley drew his gun and crouched beside Jake. "How many shooters?" "At least 3, maybe more," Jake replied, returning fire toward the muzzle flashes in the rocks above. The gunfight continued for several minutes, with bullets ricocheting off rocks all around them. Jake managed to wound one of the attackers, but they were pinned down with limited ammunition. Then did something that surprised everyone. She stood up and began singing in Apache, her young voice carrying clearly through the canyon. "Get down," called to her daughter. But Maria held up her hand. "No, she sings the old song, Song of the Sacred Place." As song echoed through the canyon, something remarkable happened. Apache voices began answering from the surrounding rocks. More voices joined in, then more, until the entire canyon rang with traditional Apache chanting. The gunfire stopped as Caldwell's men found themselves surrounded by Apache warriors who had been drawn by Call to protect their sacred site. Jake counted at least 20 Apache men emerging from hiding places throughout the canyon. They had come silently and positioned themselves to cut off any escape routes. An elderly Apache man approached their position. He spoke briefly with Maria in their native language, then addressed Jake and Sheriff Bradley in English. "I am Joseph Running Bear, war chief of this band. Maria has told us of your honor in protecting our people and our sacred place. These white men who shoot at you have no honor. They will leave now or face consequences." The 3 gunfighters, realizing they were hopelessly outnumbered, threw down their weapons and emerged from the rocks with their hands raised. "Chief Running Bear, I'm Sheriff Bradley from Tucson. I'd like to take these men into custody for attempted murder and trespassing." "They are yours, Sheriff," Running Bear replied. "But know that Apache people will be watching this sacred place. Any who come with greedy hearts will find no welcome here." As Bradley's deputies, who had been following at a distance, helped secure the prisoners, Maria approached Chief Running Bear. They spoke for several minutes in Apache before the chief turned to Jake. "Maria tells me you offered protection to our women when they had nothing. You asked for no payment, expected no reward. This is the mark of a man with good spirit." "I just did what was right," Jake replied. "Yes, and now the sacred symbols have done their work. They brought our people a protector, an honest lawman, and a chance to preserve the water gift for future generations." Chief Running Bear reached into a leather pouch and a small silver ornament. "This comes from the sacred cave, given freely by the water spirits. Wear it to remember that some treasures are meant to be shared, not hoarded." 3 months later, Jake stood on his porch watching Maria tend her garden while taught to read from books they had purchased with their wages. Sheriff Bradley had successfully filed the water rights claim, and the territorial government had designated the underground river system as a protected water source. Caldwell had appealed the decision all the way to federal authorities, but without the Apache symbols to prove his claims about Spanish silver, his case had been dismissed. The 3 gunfighters he had left behind were serving time in the territorial prison. Jake touched the silver ornament he now wore around his neck, remembering Chief Running Bear's words about shared treasures. The Apache symbols had indeed turned the tide, not through the promise of hidden wealth, but through the wisdom of protecting what truly mattered. The underground river continued to flow, providing water for both Apache settlements and new homesteaders who treated the land with respect. And somewhere in the sacred cave, silver formations continued growing, untouched and beautiful, watched over by guardians who understood the difference between true treasure and fool's gold. As the sun set over the desert, Jake realized he had found something more valuable than any silver mine. He had found a purpose worth defending and people worth protecting. The cowboy's declaration had brought him face to face with greed and violence, but it had also led him to discover the real meaning of wealth in the harsh but beautiful frontier land.